you for joining us today. As you know, Mayor Ginther formed the Columbus Community Safety Advisory Commission as part of his comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy. This commission brings to the table a wide range of backgrounds and experiences, from social services to academics to law enforcement. Our charge was to make concrete, actionable recommendations to further strengthen our division of police, to ensure that safety strategies meet our residents' expectations and protect and serve our entire community. We have spent the last year reviewing existing research of respected law enforcement and social justice experts. We have spent countless hours covering subjects including use of force, hiring process and collective bargaining, internal affairs, crisis intervention and training, and 21st century policing. Before I go further in my remarks, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to each and every member of the commission. We have had over 18 commission meetings since we started in April of last year. But in addition to the actual commission meetings, I believe that all commissioners are serving on a subcommittee looking at very specific area. They have put in hours where that is concerned. And quite frankly, we have a number of our commissioners who on their own have researched particular items and then shared it with the entire commission. And so again, as your chair, I just really want to say thank you. At the same time that we did all of this work, Matrix Consulting has been conducting a safety evaluation that covers work outside of the scope of the commission. But today, we want to hear from you. Each of you will have 3 minutes, and you will notice the monitors that will begin when you start speaking, counting down your 3 minutes. To address the commission, please tell us your name, where you live in the city, and if you are representing an organization. I'm going to ask that if you can, that you keep your comments to subjects relevant to our work: de-escalation, crisis intervention and implicit bias training, use of force policies, diversity recruitment and retention, and early intervention and office wellness programs. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. I will actually call your name in the order that you sort of checked in today. But before we do that, I would like each of the commissioners to introduce himself or herself, and I will start to my far left.
Thank you, Chair Jackson, for your thanks on behalf of myself and to the entire commission. My name is Oletha Wall. I work at the Columbus Urban League, and I serve as an intervention specialist there, and also give leadership to our fatherhood program.
Awesome. Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany White. I am the chairperson of the North Central Area Commission.
Good afternoon. Tracy Shaw, Fraternal Order of Police.
Hello, my name is Emily Buster. I work for ETSS, a nonprofit organization that serves immigrants and refugees here in Central Ohio, and I live on the north side of Columbus.
Hi, I'm Erin Sink. I'm the Vice Chair of the Southside Area Commission.
Good afternoon. My name is LaShawn Carter, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. Also serve as the Director of Strategy, Diversity, and Evaluation for Franklin County Children's Services.
Hey everybody, my name is Matthew McChrystal. I live in Old Town East. I've got about a decade of public safety experience, and I'm here as a volunteer and a resident.
I've introduced myself, but I would ask if you have anything that makes noises, phones, or anything like that, that you please turn them off or put them on mute, and I would ask the same thing of the commissioners.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Chanelle Jones. I'm the Chair of the Public Safety Programs at Franklin University.
I'm Mary Worley with Jewish Family Services. I serve as a career consultant and Bonet case manager, and I'm a resident member of Linden.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tammy Fournier Alsadr. I'm a lifelong resident of Columbus, Ohio, residing on the north side of Columbus, also a lead organizer with the People's Justice Project.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pastor Jason Ridley, National Board Member for Faith and Public Life, and I've pastored on the Hilltop.
My name is Reggie Wilkinson. I'm in my 46th year in the justice business. I live in the Short North or Victorian Village. Most people know me as having been the director of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. I also serve on the Ohio Peace Officers Training Commission and chaired the Attorney General's Advisory Group on Law Enforcement Training.
I'm Vlad Kogan. I'm an associate professor at the OSU Department of Political Science, and I live in Wineland Park.
Good afternoon. I live in the Discovery District, and professionally, I'm the risk manager for community employee safety with Nationwide Children's Hospital.
So before I first call our first speaker, yes, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Ellen Moore Griffin. I live on the northwest side of Columbus, but born and raised here, and am the executive director of Community Crime Patrol, which is a nonprofit community-based crime prevention organization that's been in the University District and several neighborhoods for the past 28 years.
I realized that I did not introduce myself. I am Janet Jackson. I'm a lawyer. I've served this community as a trial lawyer, as a judge of the Franklin County Municipal Court for almost 10 years, and the Columbus City Attorney for 6 years. I served you also as the President and CEO of the United Way of Central Ohio for over 14 years, and I am now failing at retirement. But I am thrilled to be here with you this afternoon. And with that, I'd like to call our first speaker to the podium, Linda Smith. Good afternoon, Ms. Smith, and we welcome you.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad that you're doing this. It really is a public service. My name is Pastor Linda Smith. I'm a retired minister. My last congregation was down in Athens, Ohio, and I live on the north side of Columbus now. I'd like to congratulate the Columbus Police Department on recognizing that the Guardian model is more effective than the Warrior model, but I think more is needed. Police work is to protect and serve, and police officers also face danger. The tougher neighborhoods have social problems, we all know. Problems that the police can't solve: poverty, drug abuse, mental illness. Not only can police suffer trauma, they come in contact with citizens dealing with their own trauma. So how can the Columbus Police build mutual trust with a citizen under those conditions? How can neighborhoods be policed effectively so they can be real partners in making communities safer and healthy? Because right now, I feel there are too many injured police officers, people dead or imprisoned unnecessarily, families grief-stricken, and wrongful death suits against the city. The best practice, in my mind, is trauma-informed policing, including crisis intervention training. Trained officers recognize that there's a continuum of ways to gain control of a situation. Sometimes reasonable force just means talking. We don't need any more tragic stories of a person with a serious mental illness killed by the police. Such situations are usually happen because of miscommunication or missed cues. Standard police training is, my understanding, is to issue commands, and if the command is not followed, to become more aggressive. These tactics are sometimes necessary, but it's exactly the wrong thing to do with a person who has mental illness, developmental disorder, or a history of untreated trauma. Trauma-informed policing is more than a technique. It's a culture change. It's a paradigm shift that has been done effectively in other cities of comparable size to Columbus, like Indianapolis, like Memphis and Nashville, Tennessee. I believe. They started with a 40-hour training of all officers, not just the new recruits or volunteers like they do in Columbus, everybody. And they also had a chief who carried out the reinforcement of using those methods. So it's both training and it comes from the top. And I also think that there's not enough acknowledgement that the police carry their own trauma. When police learn to cope better with stress, they have more resilience and control when they're on the job.
Thank you. Our next speaker this afternoon is Barbara Kane. Good afternoon, Ms. Kane.
Good afternoon. Oops. Chairman Jackson and commissioners, my name is Sister Barbara Kane. I'm a Dominican Sister of Peace, and I live here in Columbus, and our mother house is here in Columbus as well. I grew up in Central Ohio back in the 60s and was taught by my parents that our police officers were there to protect us and that we could trust them. Law enforcement is so important to our communities, and to be effective, they must have the trust of the community. Unfortunately, this is not the case with many citizens today, especially the poor and with those persons of color. They do not trust the police, that they are on their side and are concerned about their safety. This is also true within the Columbus Police Department itself. Police officers must trust each other if they are to be effective and serve our community. They must trust each other in order to be safe. But there is not trust in the police department, especially by women officers and officers of color. I am a part of a clergy group that has heard stories of officers being harassed and discouraged from moving into different departments or shifts. We have heard about white officers showing up late at potentially dangerous situations and not backing up their fellow officers. We have heard of emails accusing officers of color of being lazy, and we have heard that efforts to report this harassment are often ignored. We have heard of harassing officers being protected by the department and by the union. There is a systemic effort in the Columbus Police Department to harass women and officers of color. This attitude extends to the community where young men of color are treated as threats, regardless of the situation. Because of hearing about the discrimination and retaliation in the Columbus Police Department, we have developed 7 expectations that were presented to Mayor Ginther for implementation. These expectations were developed because there must be change in the department. These are the expectations. Number 1, direct equal employment opportunity complaints to the EEO office within the City of Columbus Human Resources Department instead of the Columbus Police Department Internal Affairs Bureau. Number 2, eliminate the subjectivity that currently affects the way rules of conduct violations are determined and discipline is subsequently dispensed. Predetermine the disciplinary action for each violation of the rules of conduct and apply these disciplines uniformly. Number 3, create an avenue separate from the Columbus Police Department that division personnel can use to report incidents of corruption. Number 4, direct community complaint investigations conducted by Internal Affairs Bureau involving racial profiling and discrimination to be reviewed by the City of Columbus EEO office. Require psychological counseling for extended period of, oh crap, sorry.
Sister, can you make those recommendations available to us?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Deborah Crawford.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, good afternoon.
I'm speaking as a private citizen seeking safety and justice for all citizens, and I know that's what all of you want also. I've been seriously studying racism and criminal justice for 6 years. I talked with everyday folks, city council members, activists, 2 sitting chiefs of police, college professors, civil rights lawyers, journalists, and Columbus police officials. I've had a long career in public health, I have a BA in criminal justice, and I have 2 master's degrees. The mayor started the commission with the stated purpose to bridge the gap between the community and law enforcement. This gap is historical and present day. It's backed up by piles and piles of solid data that show a national pattern of racial profiling, abuse of force, lack of procedural justice, lack of accountability for dangerous officers, and racial discrimination within departments. Real and measurable police reform is not just a Columbus problem. It is a nationwide challenge. Racial discrimination is well documented throughout the juvenile and criminal justice systems. It is embedded in our culture, and it is embedded in Columbus. Just one example, Barbara Kane, sister, was just referring to. I thought that your group would have spoken about those recommendations. I didn't hear that in all of the times that I went to your meetings. 6 years ago, my goal was to work towards making the Columbus Division of Police the most fair, respected force in the nation, trusted by all Columbus citizens, regardless of their zip code. When I approached several police leaders and officers with this idea, I was repeatedly told in some fashion, "We're not perfect, but we're close." We are not close. And your recommendations will not get us closer unless you recommend that an independent community citizen body monitor police, and this body assures that progress is objectively reviewed, transparent, ongoing, intentional, and relentless. This recommendation is within your charge to strengthen Columbus Police. You all know that plans often sit on a shelf. A one-time blue ribbon commission does not equal change. There is well-documented research on what makes for an effective civilian oversight body that actually builds trust through accountability and transparency. It's in the literature, you can look it up. A critical success factor to this success is independence from law enforcement. You've worked very hard over the last year. You've poured a lot into this. It's just the beginning of the road to change. Please don't let all this work be for nothing. You have to have teeth in your recommendations. Please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker slip has 2 names, and it indicates both speaking on the same topic. I'm going to treat you as 2 separate individuals, so you will each have 3 minutes. Megan Basinger and Anna Roller. Megan Basinger and Anna Roller. Okay. I'll put this aside and maybe later. Our next speaker would be Donnie Dawson.
He said he was coming at 6 o'clock.
That's right. And what I've said to staff, I'd call the name now, and then I would also call it later, just in case he came early. So thank you. Kurt, is it Looper? The last name Looper?
That's correct.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. In the initial introduction, reference was made to the topics that were considered during your number of months as a commission, and I vaguely recall that you did focus on the issue of the Internal Affairs Office. I'd like to make a few comments regarding that as a larger topic, but more specifically regarding, and I'll use the term, the good police officer. It's been in the news at different times, the predicament that good police officers find themselves in. More recently, we saw a lengthy account of a good police officer in Chicago who suffered so much reprisal for doing the right thing that she felt it necessary, and also her partner felt it necessary to just quit. In that particular instance, the good police officer came to confirm that complaints by the citizens were true, that there was a bad police officer that was fleecing the public. He would blackmail the public. He would plant false evidence on individuals to get them to be quiet or to teach them a lesson. We've heard of these things over a number of years, and particularly those of us who are of some age who pay attention to this, particularly in that it's often the minorities who seem to be most vocal about these type of complaints. I've come to recognize that our world is extremely sophisticated now. Detective work, for example, is not just a matter of showing up and following people. There is something called digital surveillance. I can imagine then that in the world of digital surveillance, there are people who are also being framed and taught a lesson for speaking up. It is now possible to plant false information on electronic devices, computers, and mobile devices. You can upload spurious material to discredit someone who might be a potential whistleblower. My concern then is if there are good police officers who, like the officer in Chicago, who's encountering that there is a subgroup of officers who are swindling the public, discrediting the public, what provisions are there for our local police officers who want to be good, who want to be whistleblowers? Did you look at how to protect their interests as they try to protect persons that I'm concerned with, which are often minorities, particularly low-income persons?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Diefendorfer.
Good afternoon, Advisory Council Commission members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input at today's public forum. My name is Lisa Diefendorfer. I'm the Deputy Director of Operations and Advocacy for Capitol Crossroads and Discovery Special Improvement Districts downtown. The two SIDs represent 780 property owners in a 80 square block area of downtown. They invest about $2.75 million annually in supplemental safety, homeless outreach, and cleaning services. So be patient. I'm going to give you a little background, and then I'm going to give you the recommendations from the SID. The SID team, comprised of uniformed ambassadors, homeless outreach specialists, and special duty officers, have traditionally been successful at addressing safety and quality of life issues with the help of social service providers, 16 precinct officers, and the city attorney's office. Unfortunately, we are finding it increasingly difficult to keep up with the growing number of issues downtown. Downtown property owners, employees, visitors, and residents are alarmed about the increased number of people on the street who are in crisis. In the last few years, we have seen a substantial increase in the number of people experiencing homelessness, people suffering from severe mental health problems, individuals dealing drugs, using drugs, and committing crimes to support their addictions. It is critical that these issues be addressed downtown. Downtown's health and the health of those individuals living on the downtown streets will suffer if no additional resources are committed to assisting people who are in crisis. I'm here today to suggest the city invest in the following resources that will either help de-escalate a crisis or prevent it from happening in the first place. Specifically, I'd like to suggest the city continue providing mental health and crisis intervention training to all police officers who are attending the police academy, ensure that all CIT officers receive some refresher crisis intervention training, and assign an additional 2 bike police officers downtown who can provide a proactive police presence, build relationships with people living and working downtown, serve as a reassuring presence, and work with the SID to help individuals in crisis get connected to services. And last year, our homeless outreach team assisted 127 people. They engaged them and got them connected to services and off the street. We'd also like to recommend that the city expand the current mobile crisis response unit so that at least 2 teams comprised of a CIT officer and net care clinician be assigned to downtown 16th precinct. The teams would be able to consistently engage people in crisis or are on the verge of crisis downtown because of housing needs, poor mental and physical health, and/or addiction issues. The team would also be able to work with staff members at properties downtown, such as the YMCA, Southeast, churches, Greyhound, and Faith Mission, who have identified people they feel are at risk. And lastly, continue staffing the Rapid Response Emergency Addiction and Crisis Team to ensure co-responder teams can help facing an opiate crisis. Thank you for listening to my suggestions and perspective today.
Thank you. Winifred Worth.
Hello, I live on the hilltop. I'd like to speak specifically against the use of felony murder because the influence of the language you use I think is very significant and affects the entire police department. Linguist Steven Pinker says the real world is to a large extent unconsciously built up on the language habits of the group. We see and hear and otherwise experience very largely as we do because the language habits of our community predispose certain choices of interpretation. In other words, to change reality, you have to change the language. So why is our police department called a police force and not a police service, as it is in Great Britain? And how about calling our police officers peace officers? That may influence whether officers remember their role is to serve and protect, not intimidate as an occupying force in certain situations. And this becomes starkly apparent in the case of felony murder, when murder no longer has a meaning because someone who never killed anyone and never intended to kill anyone can be charged with a murder and even end up on death row. The effect in the whole police department is that police will be emboldened to reckless behavior, like plowing down innocent bystanders in high-speed chases or filling teenagers full of bullet holes. Because they know they're immune to prosecution and can pin the charge of murder on a criminal. It has to affect their, knowing that they have immunity, it has to affect whether they are their behavior. So my recommendation is to rid our city of the charge of felony murder because a police force that knows it has immunity will act with impunity and cannot help but act as an occupying force and not as a police service. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, I believe it's Watt, W-O-T-T-E?
Witte.
Witte, I'm sorry, that's an I, not a, oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Hello, my name is Gary Witte. I live on the hilltop, the west side. I'm a retired United Church of Christ minister. I preface my remarks by stating that there are many fine officers in the Columbus Department of Police. I'm grateful for their service to our community. However, my concern today is that there are too many officers on the force who are out of control. Far too often, officers arrive on a scene of an altercation or a threatening situation only to heighten the drama and raise the stakes of risk and harm. The scene becomes explosive with the risk of harm or death to someone. Instead of de-escalating a heated, threatening situations, officers begin using violence and even gunplay. It's necessary to call for a mandatory de-escalation and sensitivity training of all members of our police force. The objective of a good police force is to maintain the peace of a community. All personnel should be required to take the training that teaches our officers how best to diffuse a potential harmful and dangerous situations with tactics that de-escalate and control the crisis. Lives can be saved and trust can be developed that our police force is truly in the business to serve and protect. The West Side is particularly challenging because of the poverty and unemployment statistics in our community is high. Add to the mix the high use of dangerous drugs brings constant calls for police to intervene. We are also aware of the poor reputation of Sullivan Avenue it has for the volume of sex trafficking and drug addiction of young women being prostituted on that strip. Yet it seems that our police force complicates the problem. I have witnessed police officers soliciting young women along Sullivan Avenue. I also hear many rumors from neighbors claiming that many of the known drug houses are owned by police officers themselves. Officer Andrew Mitchell is not the only police officer who owns several residences on the West Side. I call for an investigation into police officers who own homes in the area and whether there is illicit happenings at these homes. The overwhelming problem with our police force is the lack of accountability of those officers involved in shootings and excessive force. We have seen officers who have kicked, handcuffed, and subdued people and not be disciplined in any way. Excessive force and police shootings have left our community unable to trust and support our police because of the lack of accountability within our police. I believe that we are at a tipping point in our community. The next incident of an unarmed person being shot by police will cause a community uproar. However, although many...
Mr. Witte, I would ask for you to please be respectful of the rule. It was 3 minutes. I'll let you go past 3 minutes. I would ask you if you have something you would like to submit to us in writing, but the rule applies to everyone, sir.
I urge all interested parties to look at Nashville, Tennessee, where they have a community oversight board, and it's working.
Mr. Witte, these allegations are serious. Have they been reported to the Columbus Police Department?
Yes, ma'am. Is that a question?
Yes, sir. Yes, that's a question. Have the allegations you just raised are serious, and so have they been reported to the Columbus Police Department?
You tell me where I need to report it. I'm only listening to people who are concerned that in the area there are police officers who own homes that are classified as drug homes, drug places.
And that would be reported to Internal Affairs, sir.
Yes, we need an oversight board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daisha Thomas.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Daisha Thomas. I am an artist in the community. I am also completing a hunger advocacy fellowship with the Hunger Network in Ohio, and I'm also organizing director for Yes We Can Columbus. But today, I am here as a Black mother of a 20-year-old son, Aaron, who I brought with me today, who has special needs, autism, spectrum disorder, and schizophrenia. I'm here today because I want my son to feel safe in our community. He's already had the police called on him for his appearance as he was minding his own business, listening to music in a parking lot. And he's had other threats of police being called on him for the same reason. I believe all mothers deserve to know that our children are safe and cared for. I'm also here to make sure that the new chief of police cares about Black lives. We have one of the most violent and aggressive police departments in our country. Columbus Police Department has more use of force cases than the majority of major U.S. cities. Tyree King, Henry Green, and Jerron Thomas were all killed by members of police. Jerron Thomas was just like my son. He had autism and schizophrenia. He called the police when he was in crisis, and he wound up dead. Zachary Rosen shot Henry Green several times and kicked DeMarco Anderson, a young handcuffed black man, in the head. Zachary Rosen still patrols the streets in that same neighborhood in Linden. I haven't seen evidence of real leadership of change in the city. I'm tired of the status quo. I don't trust the police. I'm afraid. I don't feel safe around police. People are dying. Families are being torn apart. We need police who will build relationships with the community and who prioritize de-escalation and community empowerment. We need to develop systems to respond to people in a mental health crisis so they don't have to go to the emergency room or jail or wind up dead. People in a crisis need support, stability, and trained crisis and mental health counselors. We need to fix this broken system. We need to change the culture. We need to question when people call in that they're afraid of a black man. We need to look at every life in that situation. We need more women and people of color, more people who look like me in the police force. We need 100% of the force to be trained in implicit bias and de-escalation strategies. I want to be, but am not convinced that any police chief is going to fix abusive policing, but I hope that my testimony provides some ideas as to how. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Amanda Hayes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Amanda Hayes, and I'm the intern minister at First Unitarian Universalist Church. In my faith tradition, we acknowledge that power can be a corrupting influence. I have power as a minister, but if I go off the rails, my congregation can use the democratic process to remove me. We all need accountability, and we need more accountability the more power that we have. A gun and a badge is a lot of power, but unfortunately in Columbus, police do not have the accountability that they need. When complaints are filed, the Columbus police investigate themselves. Other cities have standing civilian review boards. The closest thing that we have to a civilian review board in Columbus is a grand jury process that until last year had never in 20 years indicted one officer. I don't mean that they never convicted an officer. I mean that in 20 years, they never once said there was enough evidence to take an officer to trial, even though in the past 8 years alone, 50 people have been killed by the Columbus police. Martin Luther King Jr. said that true peace is not the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. 20 years without an indictment may sound like peace, but when people are dying in the streets, it's not justice. It's not true peace. It's not justice when there is no indictment for 20 years until last year when a black officer killed a white woman and was indicted. I am glad to see that the death of Donna Dalton is taken seriously, but what about all the others? What about Tyree King? He was 13 years old. Judge, jury, and executioner is too much power for one person to hold. The police cannot police themselves. We need accountability appropriate to the power that we give police. We need a standing civilian review board with real authority. I say we need a standing civilian review board because there is not a one-time fix. Commission members, you are turning in your recommendations and disbanding in a few weeks, but who will hold the city accountable for following them? I say we need a standing civilian review board with real authority because I have attended quite a number of your commission meetings. So I saw that the agenda for the meetings was set by the city, not the commission members. And I saw that most of the agenda was presentations by city employees defending the status quo. And I saw that when the commission members would start getting into a productive discussion about what changes would be needed, the chair of the commission would say that they had to go on to the next part of the agenda. The police cannot police themselves. We need a standing civilian review board with real authority.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Monica Stiff.
Good afternoon, Monica Steff. I'm a business and property owner at 1584 East Livingston Avenue in the Driving Park Business District. I've been a longtime member in that area of the Driving Park. I see some familiar faces here. I don't have a speech. Everything is in my head of what I need to address here today. And I wanted to see for myself just exactly what represented this commission here of the citizens. I was asked to participate in that, and I didn't. I have enough on my hands. Number one, the police liaison officers were in precinct 11 and 12, and there's an absentee there. We know that we have new low-income housing coming up in a commercial district that needs to be revived there. You got the prostitutions, you got the drug addicts, and on my corner of Seymour and Livingston, I went to court to listen to the property owner there and his laxness of that there, and the police laxness of trying to oversee that property where it's being hung out. There needs to be more visibility. When I see on TV the Clintonville area and the bike patrol there, we need bike patrol in our area. When the police comes in that area, they need to park their car and not block up the whole one-way street there, get out of their car and fix these guys and see what they're doing. I fear for my safety, and I've been over there since 1986, and the outcome and the lackness of the police presence there. I have called 911 numerous times. I have talked to the officer liaison there. It doesn't matter if it's precinct 11 or 12. Those police officers know that there's a problem there, and they need to show their visibility. They need to have the bike patrol in that area, not just in the daytime, but in the evening. They need to be on their feet, walking around there and see for themselves. There is a presence of vacant property there, and as a licensed real estate broker, being in the business for over 30 years, I know what property values are. Until the police come together, they need to be at those commissioner meetings and those other meetings to hear what the residents of the community has to say, and hopefully that we can work together to try to get this problem resolved that is being taken over these young youths that are out there from 5, 6, 7 in the morning to midnight at night, and the police is not doing anything about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Richard Johnson.
That wasn't a grand entrance. I was going to use the restroom.
Thanks for sharing that, Mr.
Yes,
Johnson.
ma'am. Thank you, commission members. My name is Rich Johnson, and I'm the pastor at Sanctuary Columbus Church, an intentionally multiracial community. And from the time I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a pastor like Martin Luther King, and here I am today. 4 kids later, 1 wife, I have my 3rd son, age 10, Caden Thomas Johnson, who wants to be a police officer. I'm asking you to think about him when you make your recommendations. He wants to be an officer because they represent bravery, courage, and heroism. I agree that policing is an honorable profession. However, the skills of de-escalation and implicit bias are needed to maintain the vision in one young boy's mind. Simply for being African American, he could be perceived as a suspect or a threat in our own neighborhood of Northland. So this is not only for the safety of my son, it's also for the safety of our officers, who might one day be my son. Bias and de-escalation are not inherited skills and abilities that persons of color possess. So this issue is not just racial, it's also economic and it's geographical. I would implore you to add percentages of our entire police force who have received this training. And lastly, in search of the future chief of police, please consider Caden Thomas Johnson. Seriously, He's only 10 right now, but your recommendation and the strength of your recommendation will pave the way for Caden, so that in the future, when he's 25 or 30, having graduated from Morehouse College just like his father, he could serve this city and community with bravery, with courage, and with honor. Start today by demanding programs that will identify scholarship and hire police of color. And I'm not talking blue, I am speaking African American, Latino, Asian, in our city of Columbus. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to apologize to the audience and the speakers for the cough, and I was hoping I wouldn't have to do this today. I suffer from acid reflux, so I'm not contagious. I feel perfectly fine, but that cough just comes out and I can't stop it. It is very disruptive, and I apologize. I've had to apologize to my fellow commissioners on more than one occasion. So, our next speaker, Joe Motel.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Joe Motel. I'm a resident of Columbus. I live at 167 West Cook Road in Clintonville. For several years now, myself and hundreds of concerned Columbus citizens have been advocating for the creation of a civilian review board or independent police oversight committee, whatever you want to call it, and nothing has happened. And it is beyond me and those in law enforcement, or anyone else for that matter, that should even think that the CPD can be fair and impartial when investigating their own. And only when external and independent investigations are conducted will the community begin to share any type of mutual trust with the department. I propose a 5-member review board that must be given broad authority on policies and guidelines for punishment when an officer is found guilty of excessive force, unjustified shootings, or conduct unbecoming of an officer. A high-ranking police officer should serve as a member of the board and assist in determining disciplinary action. The board would also be granted such powers to implement the use of independent investigators when the immediate questioning of an officer is required after incidents of alleged unlawful behavior. And the rulings of the review board, they must be binding and not merely recommendations. This committee or review board must consist, among others, criminal justice attorneys who are in the practice of defending citizen complaints against police officers, and the makeup of the review board cannot include individuals who are former elected officials, current or past employees of the city, or have close political ties to City Hall. In other words, the review board, to have any credibility, it cannot consist of political puppets. There are currently nearly 150 oversight boards or committees operating in the United States, and most of them with large municipal police departments. So if drawn up correctly, it can help tremendously with improving community relations and increase police accountability. Furthermore, I believe that misconduct complaints can be successfully handled by independent external investigators in a timely manner. Placing such a short time frame of 180 days for an internal investigation to take place in a 1 year to complete an investigation allows for the investigator to drag their feet and use the excuse of being overwhelmed with their workload and that there just wasn't enough time to perform a thorough investigation of one's complaint. Misconduct complaints should be remained open for no less than 2 years. I doubt if you'll find a private employer also who does not maintain an employee's work record until the employee decides to terminate their employment with that company. Of all the occupations, police officers' personnel files on both misconduct and commendations should be part of their permanent record until they decide to leave the force. And to remove past misconduct investigations from public viewing in their record is yet another policy that invokes distrust of the CPD from the community and needs to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Tabitha Woodruff?
Good afternoon. Thank you for
afternoon.
having me. My name is Tabitha Woodruff. I've been a resident of Columbus, Ohio for 10 years. I graduated law school here in town and have been a practicing attorney since 2013. I currently serve as the statewide co-coordinator for the Ohio chapter of the National Lawyers Guild. The National Lawyers Guild was the first racially integrated bar association in the United States, founded in 1937 when black attorneys were forbidden from being members. Our mission is to fight for human rights over property rights. And in line with that, we support a variety of different programs and projects. Here in Columbus, what you may be most familiar with is our Legal Observer program. So if you've ever seen these green hats at protests, parades, events, we are legal observers, and our purpose there is to defend the First Amendment. Our goal is to observe anything the government might be doing that violates the First Amendment rights of protesters who are there to share their perspectives, as they should be free to do here in Columbus and across the United States. Unfortunately, as a legal observer myself, I have observed the Columbus police brazenly violate First Amendment rights, purposely attacking black protesters, purposely attacking Muslim protesters, and bragging about it caught on their body cameras bragging about it. What's been shocking for me as a legal observer is that in some cities, when the police see the green hats, they try to hide their misconduct. They make some effort not to violate the First Amendment and assault protesters in front of labeled legal observers. Here in Columbus, the police have a different reaction. Here in Columbus, they sometimes actually target the attorneys who are there to be legal observers. Some of my colleagues at NLG include Kevin Truitt, a well-respected attorney who works at Disability Rights Ohio. He fights for the rights of disabled Ohioans. He was pepper sprayed directly in the face while observing a protest by Columbus police officers. Another attorney I work with, Emily Dunlap, some of you may know her because of her anti-human trafficking work. She's a brilliant attorney here in town. She was actually shoved to the ground with both hands by a police officer during the Black Pride 4 protest on June 17th, 2017. If you look at public records, if you look at body cams, you'll see clear violations. For example, on January 30th, 2017, Officer James Poole bragged saying, "That chick, I want that chick to get it." Later on body cam, he's caught grabbing this woman, the chick he was referring to, by the hijab and spraying pepper spray directly into her face from a few inches away. This is the way our police behave, and I'm hoping you all can recommend a police chief who respects the First Amendment, who respects our black citizens, and respects all citizens of Columbus. Thank you.
Thank you. Tynan Krakoff.
My name is Tynan Krakoff. I'm an anti-racist organizer with Surge, showing up for racial justice. The Columbus police are violent, period. Any interaction that anyone has with the police can potentially end in their death, their arrest. So people need, as much as possible, to minimize interactions with the police. And we can talk all day about what we, the citizens, can do to avoid the police, but we need to talk instead about what the police need to do. And continually, year after year, we see more and more money going to the police budget as we see money coming out of schools, public transportation, infrastructure. So I just want to pose one question to you. What if you were told that the Columbus Police Department was going to be gone? Next year, no police, which of course sounds, probably a lot of questions come to your mind, but truly think of that. If the police were gone next year, there was $0 for the police, what would you do? How would you spend the money that's going to the police? And I want you to really think of that, because of course the police can't go away overnight. So what if it was actually your job to make the police obsolete? Because that's what we need. For people to be safe, we need to get rid of the police and instead invest in communities. We need to invest in schools and public housing and healthcare and clean water. All the stuff that we know is wrong with Columbus. So just really think of that question. What would you do if you had no option but that the police were going to be gone? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take just a pause, not a break, but just a pause. Adam? Recall the names of Megan Bassinger and Anna Roller. Did you appear? Then this is what we're going to do. I have exhausted the speaker slips that were presented to me earlier. We're going to take a 15-minute break. If there are speaker slips, I think they're over there. If you have heard something or you want to present, please fill out a slip. They will be, I don't see Denise, but we will take them, and if we can have some more questions, we will do that. But meanwhile, we'll take a 15-minute break. Pardon? I can't.
I'm curious as to whether or not this session is being recorded, and if so, will it be a public record?
I believe it is being recorded. They usually. So it's being live streamed on Channel 3, and it's being recorded, and I believe will be shown at a later time on that station. Am I correct, Adam?
And it'll also be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel.
If you have for a hard copy of the DVD, do we contact you?
No, but you and I can talk about that, how to get a copy.
Okay, so again, thank you. We'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll see if there are any additional requests for speakers in this session. Thank you. I don't believe that we received any additional requests for speakers this afternoon, so we are going to adjourn this session of the public hearing, and we will reconvene for the 6 o'clock session at 6 o'clock. So have a pleasant remainder of your day.